Good evening, everyone. We're middle of Siman Tesvav in Iggeres HaKodesh. We are holding on page 244. And today we are holding by Yesod. This is, as mentioned, this is the letter where the Alter Rebbe explains all the spheres, all Hashem's spheres, and we gain an understanding in Hashem's spheres by looking at our own psychology, because B'Tselem Elokim, we are created in Hashem's image, so we have a similar spiritual composition and constitution as does Hashem, with limits. Remember, we spoke about the mashal of Anechi Afer Ve'efer, within limitations, but ultimately, to a certain degree, we have a similar spiritual constitution. So we finished Netzach V'Hoid. I just want to finish off that conversation about Netzach and Hoid. Is there anyone over here in this room, by any chance, who ever made a hachlata, a Kabbalah, and didn't end up keeping it for all time?
What do you mean?
Made a decision, I'm going to start doing something, start learning something, start certain, and you didn't end up keeping it.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, sure.
Even though you said that you would.
Yeah, like a partial. You started and then failed.
Well, then you failed.
Yeah. Something went wrong that you couldn't complete it.
Sas on you too?
Mm-hmm.
Really?
Oh, what about you?
I did it for a while, then I couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
You couldn't do it anymore. What happened that you couldn't do it anymore?
15 years ago, I started saying Kaddish for people
Yeah.
that nobody says for him. I said for a year or two, then I couldn't do it. So I went to make Atarat Nedarim, and then a year later I start again.
Okay, so
Until today I'm doing it.
I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about a real situation in which you can't do it and you do Atarat Nedarim. I'm not talking that. I'm talking about an instance, a situation where I decided to do something. I made a hachlata, and then shortly thereafter, it doesn't happen. Okay, Sasson, for you maybe it doesn't exist, but for most other people in this world, myself included, it's something which happens quite often. We make a certain hachlata, we're going to do something, and it somehow or other lasts for a day or two, a week or two, a month or two. That's a good one. By the way, this is a phenomenon in the world. You have, I remember seeing once, in the world, there's this thing, New Year's resolution. We're approaching the secular New Year, so people make resolutions. So I remember seeing once a certain day, maybe in the end of January, or the beginning of February, and this is the day they took surveys. Most people by this time had already given up the New Year's resolution. Doesn't take long. Why is it that we don't follow through hachlatas? The reason why, for the most part, there are sometimes you're giving an extreme situation where you took upon yourself a certain decision and then circumstances changed and you partially weren't able to. In which case, that's not. We're not talking about that. It's something which is obviously excusable. But in most cases, we make a hachlata, we make a certain decision when we are in a state of inspiration. Okay, I'm going to start learning Daf Yomi. Why? Because I am so inspired, and I want to learn Gemara every day, and I want to finish Shas. So my feelings, my emotions are running high at that time. Now, I'm deciding I'm learning a blot a day, which actually I'm thinking right now is very reasonable. Blot a day, it's not that hard. In fact, I'm so excited right now about this, I probably could learn 3 blot a day. But I'm taking it easy. I don't want to overdo it, so I'm going to do only 1 blot a day. And what happens 3 weeks later? What happens 3 weeks later is your excitement is gone. Your excitement is gone. Your emotions are gone. You are, because excitement and inspiration by definition usually doesn't last. And when the excitement is gone, suddenly a daf a day is darn hard. It's not easy anymore. Well, so that which 3 weeks ago I thought was a piece of cake isn't a problem. Suddenly, wow, it's very hard. And there's the famous saying that they attribute to Einstein, which everyone knows, that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and expecting different results. But the funny thing is that we do it again and again. And just again we make achlata. I get excited again, I make another achlata. And 3 weeks later it's gone. And then 2 months later I make another achlata. We're doing the same thing. We delude ourselves. When we are in a state of inspiration, we delude ourselves into thinking that this time the inspiration is going to last. And if as long as the inspiration lasts, then I have no problem doing it. And then reality hits us in the face. And suddenly, inspiration is gone, and with the inspiration goes also the hachlata. Now, obviously, with the missing link over here, what's missing over here is the netzach and hoid, which we spoke about at length last week. Netzach and hoid are the unemotional emotions. Those are what keep driving us after our emotions are gone. Our emotions are gone. Remember, we spoke last week about the shtei badei arava. We always look at the hadas and say, "Wow, the hadas smells so good, so beautiful," and the aravas, yeah. They say it's a klapta, it's a klapta hishaina. What's a arava? But actually, we're seeing over here the hadasim, which represent the emotional emotions. Hadasim represent chesed, gvura, and tiferes. They're actually, to a certain extent, greatly limited. Why? Because their effect goes away when the feeling goes away, when the passion goes away, when the passion subsides. And what really carries us through life is the aravas. The aravas, which represent netzach and hoid, and we have to activate our netzach and hoid, meaning that while we are in a state of inspiration, and when we make the hachlata, we have to have I would say the sanity and the clear-headedness to realize it's beautiful and it's great that I'm in right now in this kind of emotional state. But in 2 days from now, 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, however long it's going to be, that's not going to be there anymore. So I have to already now kick in with my netzach and hoid. Meaning, number one, I have to make sure that my achlata is something which is practical, which is going to be practical even when I'm not in an inspired state. I have to start making plans. A certain determination that we have to awaken within ourselves. Maybe instead of saying that I'm going to learn a daf a day, say I'm going to learn a daf a day with the chavrusa. Because even when my inspiration goes away, I have the chavrusa. We know that that's one of the best ways to keep a hachlata is to have a partner in the hachlata. Or some other ways or some other metrics, whatever it may be. It's the importance of activating in an immediate way, activating the netzach v'hoid, and to make sure that even after the inspiration goes away, we're still going to remain. We're still going to remain with that hachlata. And with that, we've finished netzach and hoid. So what we really have over here is we have chesed, gvura, tiferes, which are the emotional emotions, and we have netzach and hoid, are the non-emotional emotions. And we're going to move on to Yisoid, but Yisoid already Yisoid is the beginning of the action. Ultimately, everything leads to the action. Seif davar, seif ma'asav machshavat chila. Ultimately, everything is about the action. So chachma, bina, das, chesed, gvura, everything is meant to lead you to an action. And chachma through hoid are the internal process that gets you there. Yisoid, the actual action is malchus, and as we'll see, Yisoid is the spiritual counterpart of that action, but it's already part of the action. So if you want to divide between the feelings within me that brought about the action and the action itself, the feelings within me and that whole process, that spiritual process that plays inside me that leads me to the actual action, that ends with hoid. Because Yisoid already is part of the action, as we'll see soon, as we'll explain what Yisoid is. Which is interestingly why, Lag BaOmer is a very special day. And on Lag BaOmer, the sphira that we do on Lag BaOmer is Hoid Sheba Hoid. That's the sphira of Lag BaOmer. What's the significance of Hoid Sheba Hoid? So explain in the Chassidus. Now we know that when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, they were behemoths. Yeah, they had the midas of a behemoth. which is why in the second day of Pesach, the carbon that was brought was the carbon ha'omer, which is the only carbon sibur which was brought from sa'ir and barley, which in it's a Michael Behema, right? I don't know if that's still today that barley is a Michael Behema, but back in the day, chitim, wheat was considered Michael Adam, was considered human food, and barley was primarily used as fodder, as animal food. Because when the Yidden went out of Mitzrayim, they were in Mem Tes Shari Tumah. We know they were in the 49th gate of impurity. And forget about them being unspiritual and forget about them being unholy. Torah mitzvahs, they were not yet ready to receive the Torah because they were behemoths. Their nefesh of Hamas was in full force, and they had animalistic tendencies and character traits. And that's why the Yidden right away had to embark on a 7-week process of refinement. And every single week they worked on a different midah. The first week they worked on chesed, and the second week they worked on gevura. The third week on teferes, the fourth week on netzach, the fifth week on hoid, the sixth week on yisoid, and the seventh week on malchus. And within those weeks itself, every single day they worked on a certain sub emotion. So on the first day is chesed sheba chesed and gevura sheba chesed. On Lag BaOmer, we arrive at Hoid Sheba Hoid, which means that we've already elevated, refined Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, and also within Hoid, we've already refined Chesed, Gevura, Teferes, Netzach, and Hoid. So now really what's left is only Yisoid and Malchus. That's all that's remaining. 2 weeks of Yisoid and Malchus, and in the fourth week also we have Yisoid Shebahoid and Malchus Shebahoid. So everything from here on is Yisoid and Malchus. So on Lag BaOmer, to a certain extent, we're ready for Matan Torah. Why is that? Because based on the understanding that we have over here, that really the internal processes are Chesed through Hoid, and Yisoid and Malchus are already about the action. So if you're talking about the internal refinement, by Hoid Shebahoid, the internal refinement is already finished. Now, yes, there's still another 2.5 weeks we have to work now on the action element, but the internal refinement is already finished. And that's one of the reasons why Lag BaOmer is such a special day, is because after leaving Mitzrayim, it is the day when we completed that internal refinement.
Amen.
And now we move on to Yisoid. We finished the internal process that leads up to the action. Now we have the action itself, or in the words of Chassidus, the hashpah itself. It's time to give. It's time to do. The joy and the pleasure and the geschmack that a person has in the hashpah, in the connection with another, that is Yisoid. There is the act of giving, and there is the pleasure that you take in that giving. The act of giving is Malchus. The pleasure that you take in it, that is Yisoid. Now you're going to say, why do I need, what's make a difference whether I have pleasure in giving or not? I'm giving, what's make a difference? And that's what we're going to find out. So Yisoid is the idea of spiritual connection. It is the spiritual element of the connection that you are making through the action and the pleasure you're taking in it. And that's why also we know that in the chart where every single one of the spheres corresponds to a certain organ or a certain limb of the body. So for example, Chesed is the right arm, and the Gvura is the left arm, Teferes is the torso, Netzach and Hoid are the two legs, and Yisoid, as we say in the Zohar, is Ois Bris Kodesh. Yisoid is the sexual organ, because that is the way we connect. That is the idea of that is bonding, is connection. Hiskashrus. That is the idea of Yisoid, the connection, and in a deeper sense, not deeper, but the pleasure that one takes in the connecting. Let's do this inside. Page 244, 6 lines from the bottom. Beginnas Yisoid. What is Yisoid? Yalderech Mashal is using an example. Ha'iskashrus, the connection. Shemekasher ha'av sichloi b'seichel benoi. That going back to the example that we've been using all along, the connection that the father connects his mind with the mind of his son, b'shas limud imay, while he is teaching him, ba'ava, with love, v'ratzon, and desire, He's not only giving, he's not only teaching, he has this deep desire that his child should understand. Now you're going to say, why is that important? The Rebbe says, without this, even if, let's say, the child were to hear these words of Torah, as the father is saying them, but without the connection and without the love. Imagine that the father is learning by himself, speaking to himself, saying these words of Torah, and the son's eavesdropping, the son is listening. He would not understand as well. Like he understands now that the father is connecting his mind to him and speaking to him face to face, ba'ava, with love, v'cheshek, and a gishmak, a pleasure, shechoshek mo'id, that the son and the father has this great desire, sheyavin b'noi, that the child should understand. So you're going to say, what does it make a difference? It makes a difference. It makes a difference. The hashpah is received by the recipient in a much better and greater way and to a greater degree when the hashpah is given with love and with care and with pleasure. I think we all know that when we're listening to, when we're receiving something from someone or listening to someone or whenever something is being done, this is about, and it's being done with a pleasure in it being done, the end product is a better end product. The recipient, the receiver receives better and receives more. And now the Alter Rebbe takes in the other direction. It's not only in terms of the child's ability to receive, but also the greater the desire and the pleasure of the father. Also, the amount that the father is going to give will also be a greater amount. Because again, the child can receive more, and the father can give more. It is because of the pleasure and the desire. The father's mind expands. And there's more what to give to the child. Yes?
What about if the father is Amaretz?
This is only a mashal. It could be in any which way. Whatever you give to your child, whatever you give to anyone, whatever you do for anyone, Yisoid is the pleasure that you take in that. The pleasure and the joy that you take in that. So as you can see, this is the spiritual element of the giving. It's already, you're doing it. Everything we described up until now, and that's Yisoid, comes before the giving. That's the process that leads you to give. Once you give, once you're giving, the pleasure that you take in connection. Yisoid is about connection. And the connection itself is the goal. And therefore the pleasure you take in that is the Yisoid. I know for myself that when I look back at my childhood, and I think of the various teachers that I had, and there's one teacher that sticks out in particular as being a very special teacher and having, I think he gave me a lot. And I look back at this teacher and I'm like, probably wasn't the best teacher in the world. Probably didn't know the techniques too much. Probably was a little abusive at times also. A little abusive at times also, especially by today's standards. In other words, he might have lost his temper one time too many. But the one thing that made him unique amongst all my teachers, and something which was very clear, he loved us and he wanted to teach us. He had this desire to give us Torah, to give us Chassidus, to give us, to be madrichas, and that made all the difference in the world. It's not about, he had that Yisoid. Midas HaYisoid was very powerful. It's the pleasure in giving, the pleasure in connecting. And that is what Midas and that is what Yisoid is all about. And when you have that, again, it increases the flow of the mashpia, and it also increases the receptivity of the mekabel, and allows the mekabel to receive even more. Yes?
Does it also have to do with the chayas with which he's giving?
Well, I think the chayas is a symptom of Yisoid. When you have that, you know, you always wonder that certain teachers. I see sometimes a teacher 70 years old, 75 years old, and he still has that geschmack in teaching, and I'm like, how did you not burn out? Teaching is a hard job. Teaching is a hard job. And if I had to diagnose it, I would say, that there are Shiva Knei Menorah, right? Every single Yid has a neshama from a certain branch, and some people are Chesed, some people are Gevurah, and even someone who's Chesed will get burned out Gevurah. And then I believe that those teachers who keep on going year after year, and they have the white beards, and they're still going. Now you have a lot of people with white beards are still going, and and that's not necessarily a good thing for the chinuch system. But then you have those select few. They've been teaching for 40 years, and they're still at the top of the game. It's because of Yesod. These are people who they have a specialty in Yesod. It's about connection. They connect, and they love connecting, and that's their chayis, and that's their life. And you know what? These people don't have too many problems in their class, because the kids sense that chayis, they sense that joy, they sense that desire that they have to teach. They sense that the teacher isn't busy, always just okay. How many minutes? What?
Watching his watch.
Watching the watch, right?
All the time.
Yeah. I taught many years ago. I taught in Mesivta, and I know what it means to watch the clock. I know what it means, and I can't say I didn't enjoy it, but I was watching it. Yeah, there was a certain element of clock watching, and I wasn't cut out to be there. I would have been by now. I would have been burned out anyways. By the way, Yossi is a former student of mine from back in the days when I taught in Mesivta.
Wow.
Yeah, I must have some level of Yisod if you're still coming to my shiurim.
Yes, right.
But Kapanim, that's what Yisod is all about. So as you see, Yesod and Malchus are very closely related. Malchus is the actual hashpah, Malchus is the giving, the Yesod is the pleasure in it. And by the way, without going into too much, but the connection to the Parsha is, you have this week's Parsha, Ben Piras Yosef. Yosef represents the idea of Yesod. Yosef Atzadik, he represents the idea of connection and of giving. And there's a very strong connection between Yesod and Malchus. Yehuda is Malchus and Yosef is Yesod. And there's always that connection between Yehuda and Yosef. Those are always the two big players. Okay. And now, as we mentioned, that just like everything is true in the spiritual sense, it's also true in the physical sense. Remember, we said that in the body also, the limb of the body, the organ of the body that corresponds to Yesod are the genitals. So the Rebbe says, the same thing. This is actually similar to the way it is physically. The Ribui Hazera, in the course of the union between a man and woman, the Ribui Hazera, there is a lot more seed. The more that there is a cheshek, the more that there is a desire of a tainug and pleasure, the more seed there is. You know that the Kabbalah talk a lot about the idea that the seed comes directly from the brain, from the mind. So when there's a lot of seed, that means that there's a lot being drawn from the mind. And that's why the Kabbalah, they compare this to the physical union. It's really the same idea. That over here, for example, you're a teacher, you want to teach the child. And the greater your Yesod, which means the greater the pleasure that you have in that connection that you have with the Mekabel, the more you're able to to draw down from the Chachma, the Bina, and the Das, and be able to transmit to the recipient. And then so with this we've concluded the 6 Midas, and then there is Malchus. Alter Rebbe doesn't talk about Malchus over here. We'll talk about it a little later on, but the main thing to understand is that Malchus is already action. Malchus is already not in any part of the spiritual internal process. Malchus is an actual action. So with here, we've concluded everything spiritual that goes on inside you, starting from Chesed and all the way through Yesod. You send with Chesed again being a positive feeling, Gevurah being a negative feeling. Tferes is a hybrid of Chesed and Gevurah. Netzach and Hoid are the unemotional emotions which extend and cause you to act despite the fact that the feelings might have gone away because you hit reality. Yesod is the pleasure in the act, and then there's Malchus. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to work backwards. Actually, 1 second. Before we work backwards, these midas. Actually, the Alter Rebbe says Chesed and Gevurah are the chitzonius. Those are the outer midas, the external midas. Within Chesed and Gevurah and all the other midas, there are internal midas, which are Ava and Yira. Interesting, the Rebbe is saying that even though we talk always about chesed and gevura, but essentially, think about it. Chicken and egg. Chesed and gevura, chesed and ava. Which one is the chicken, which one is the egg? Well, okay, we don't know the chicken and egg, which one comes first. But of chesed and ava, which one comes first? Do you love because you're kind, or are you kind because you love? Ava comes first. So therefore, chesed is a midah chitzonis. It's only external. The internal midah really is ava. And the same thing is gevura. Gevura comes from yira. For example, what is gevura in a relationship? Your child comes and says, I want this $1,000 toy. Let's say. So you're going to say no. Why are you saying no? Think about it for a second. What? If it's too expensive, then that's not part of your relationship with him. That's not a valid reason. What do I mean? That might be a valid reason if you don't have the money, but then there's nothing to do with the child. That's not part of your relationship. That's simply you can't afford it. If, let's say, you could afford it, you probably still wouldn't give it to your child, right? Why wouldn't you give it to your child?
Not beneficial.
Because it's not beneficial. Meaning you have yira. You're afraid of what spoiling can do to your child. So the gevura is a result of the yira. So chesed is a result of ava, and gevura is a result of yira. Inside. This is by way of example. A child, a father who gives to his child, and why is that? So the chesed comes because of ava. And the same thing is the father will withhold giving to the child, which is gevura. But where does the gevura come from? Because of the fear that this giving this to the child can actually be for the child's detriment. Chas v'shalom. What is the source of all these midas? The internal and external ones, chesed, gvura, ava, yira, and all the others. What is the source of all the midas? Hu mechabad sheben nafshay. This is from the Chabad of the soul within the person. The Chachma bin Adas. Ki lifi seichel adam kachin midesav, because the emotions of a person are always according to the seichel. Kinira b'chush, as we see clearly, shakatan, that a child, shachabad shaloi bebechinas katnos. The Chabad, that the intelligence of the child is small. Kach kol midesav heim bedvarim ktani erech. So also the emotions of the child are all in small things. So my youngest is 14 years old, and I must tell you that when it comes Yom Tov, and we have Chol Hamoed, it's always tough. When they were 3, it wasn't a problem. You took them to a park, you gave them a ball, and it's good. And if that doesn't work, you take them to a place where there's a merry-go-round, and then they're mamish in 7th heaven. If that doesn't work, you take them to an ice cream store and you buy them a thing. It's the easiest thing in the world to please kids. Now my kids are all 14 and up. It comes Chol Hamoed every single year. I can't tell you. It disturbs my v'samachta b'chagecha. Actually, as of last year, I resigned the position in my family of chief executive Chol Hamoed planner, and I officially gave over the job to my kids. No, they're old enough, and I was like, I will finance it, but this is your. It was pushing. I made your stress. Comes Chol Hamoed. What are we doing? I have no idea. What do the kids want? What makes, and why is that? A little kid. The seichel is small, and because the seichel is small, the midas are small. Meaning that what gets them excited, what they have an ava for, what they enjoy, is very primitive. It's very primitive. Very small.
And also,
yeah. You make them happy with Kabbalah nothing. You take a baby and you go like this to the baby, like this, and they start laughing, right? And then you grow up a little and get that cup away from my face, right? What do you have for me? And then I want to make my wife happy. Right? That's a whole different sugya altogether, right? Because she has big asagis. The more you know, the more you understand, the more seichel you have. So your ava is for greater things. And the same thing is with little kids. What they get nervous about and what they get upset about is also over sillinesses. And when you get older, you don't get upset over those little sillinesses. You get upset over older things. And the reason for this is, you get upset over bigger things. And the reason for this is because that midas are always commensurate to the seichel. At the end of the day, I like things that I appreciate their goodness. When I have a small head, a small brain, so the things whose goodness I appreciate are small. So the extent of my appreciation is a lollipop, because that's what my mind can appreciate. Now I grow older. Do I want a lollipop? Okay, I probably still wouldn't mind a lollipop, but that's nothing compared to the so many bigger and greater pleasures that I can have. You know, it's fascinating to watch children and see what gets them excited and what gets them nervous and what gets them upset and what they fight over. It's fascinating because it's so trivial, it's so small. It's so small. And whenever I see that, I think to myself, imagine when a big tzaddik looks at us and sees how we're fighting over important things and how we get excited over important things. It's like me looking at a 2-year-old kid.
Everything relative.
Because it's all relative. What we're saying over here, that the midas of a person are lefi yarech the seichel. The more seichel you have, then your appreciation is for higher things, and your midas are for higher things, and you realize how inconsequential the smaller things are. So when you look at 2 kids and they're fighting over a chais, that they have a Lego set, and this one wants that. No, I want that piece. No, I want that piece. And you're like, use the other piece. And if you want to have the Legos, go say, like,
What's the fuss?
right. You're getting so excited over the silly thing. And we have big things. We're interested in money and honor and all these things. And imagine, and we fight over them. We get excited over them, and we spend our life chasing these things. And we imagine a tzaddik looking at us and like,
Must be crazy.
he's like, really? That's what you're fighting over? You're fighting over that Lego? Fighting over. Now, there's so many letters from the Rebbe where he expresses frustration and disappointment over the fact that the Askanim can't get together. The Askanim can't work together. There's always these petty fights and the machloikis and the politics. And you know, one way of looking at it is like the Rebbe is like, you know, we have a job to do. We have to bring Mashiach. We have to carve all the Yidden to Yiddishkeit. We have to bring Torah to everyone on mitzvahs, and this is. And also this mitzvah of Yisrael, and you know, put aside your ego. But I think in a deeper sense, the Rebbe is looking at it, and to a certain extent, the Rebbe is baffled.
Can't understand.
Can't understand. How is it? How do you?
Petty stuff.
Yeah, really? That's what you're fighting over? That you want to be you need to have that title, and you need to be in that position, and you need to have this money. Like these are garnished. These things are nothing. We have Torah, we have mitzvahs, we have the Eibishter, we have Chassidus. These are things to get excited about. These are things that are important, and it's the lollipop that you're writing me a 25-page letter telling me about someone took away your lollipop. Grow up. Allah has come and become, and this is obviously also the way that the Eibishter looks at us. We have to, and really when we understand that that our midos are lefi erech our Chabad. Our midas, our emotions, they are commensurate to our perceptions, our chachma bin and das, our intellect, and that's really what Chassidus is all about. Chassidus in general, Chassidus Chabad in particular. Ultimately, it's about da'as alekei avicha v'avdehu b'leiv avshalom. The whole purpose of enhancing and upgrading our Chabad, and upgrading our understanding of Hashem, our understanding of Torah, our understanding of the world, our understanding of the neshama, all of these things, is to lead us to a place where our midas change. Just like when you grow up, and you have higher, you evolve in what you like and what you find important and what your emotions are. By learning Chassidus, that's what's meant to happen. We're meant to evolve. That's really the essence of Chassidus, is understanding that if we want to impact our emotions, we want to have the Avdeyu B'Leiv Shalom, we want to have this Avas Hashem and Yiras Hashem, and the way to do that is by the Seichel, because as the Alter Rebbe says over here, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, Ki lefi Seichel ha'adam kach hein midaisav. Those words that we just looked, right? That the midas of a person, and by the way, the midas are the most important part of a person. At the end of the day, your midas are the most important part of who you are. The midas are where what you like and what you don't like, what you have a geschmack in, what you have a chayis, and all that's who you are. And your midas, in order to work on your midas, that is lefi sichler.
רבי שלמה המלך said, הבל הבלים אמר קהלת הכל הבל. Whatever we see, it's all heaven. It's nothing.
Right. And what better way than learning Chassidus than to come to that recognition? learning about Hashem and learning about creation. And really that's the whole purpose of Chassidus is to get you to the place, as we put it over the years in certain words, we live in a reality, which is not really a reality, it's a fakeality, if that would be a word. Which is Elamis b'pshitus ve'elakus b'hischachos. Elamis b'pshitus ve'elakus b'hischachos means
What does that mean?
that the world is b'pshitus. The world is obvious, and Hashem is a chiddush. Meaning, what's more real? What's more compelling? World or elakus?
Of course.
Elakus is more compelling to you.
To say it's simple. It's not on.
The table.
Not grasp it.
The table is here. That's for sure.
Yeah, but there's eloquence in the table.
This is real.
also.
This is reality. The Eibishter
Yeah.
I learned about in the books.
It's invisible.
What?
You see this,
You don't see it, but there's
And
eloquence.
Chassidus is coming to turn that on its face. The point of Chassidus, what we're trying to get to, and this will be the reality for the whole world when Mashiach comes, is Elokus b'pshitus v'elamis b'schachos. The Eibishter is reality. And the world is the world. I look in Torah, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashmayim v'zaaretz, must be there's a world. Because really, we'll see the V'ro kol basar yachtav kipi Hashem diber. We're going to see the Dvar Hashem, the words of Hashem that are constantly creating and putting everything in existence to the point that the ultimate reality is Hashem. And Chassidus tries to move the needle. Okay, so we're here. When Mashiach comes, we'll be here. Okay, we're not going to get necessarily over here. But Chassidus to move the needle, that Elokus should be more b'pshitos. Elokus should be more compelling. The Eibishter, Hashem, should be more compelling in Kedusha than world. Because you think about it logically. Hashem is the creator. And the world is the creation. What's more real, creator or creation? Creator. What's more compelling, creator or creation? Creator. The more we learn Chassidus, the more we learn about this, the more we learn about Hashem, the less real and compelling and important the world becomes. The less important it becomes, the less my feelings are towards it. The less I'm busy feeling that I need to have money. The less I feel that I need to have covet. The less I feel I need to have the pleasures. And what do I need? I need to connect to Hashem. And that's the seichel. The seichel of a person, through studying this stuff, through studying Chassidus, that is ultimately the goal of changing our midas, through changing our perception, changing our emotions and our feelings, through changing our perceptions of life and of reality. V'gam b'gedolim, holding inside, first word in the line is b'dvarim. Now the Alter Rebbe said that by children, we see by children, right, as children grow up, their midas change. V'gam b'gedolim, not only by children, also by adults. Lefi sichla yehul al ish. That a person is to be praised according to the seichel. Which is an interesting pasuk, because we know that there are 4 names for the human being in Hebrew. There's Adam, and Ish, and Gever, and Enosh. And each one has a different implication. Each one has a little different meaning. And the word Ish signifies the Maila of Midas. The word Ish signifies a person who has a shleimus in the area of Midas. As opposed to Adam, for example, which Adam is about a person who has a shleimus in Seichel. Now, if that's the case, then the pasuk ki lefi sichla yehul al ish is a little funny, because ish refers to midas. So what does it mean according to a person's seichel? The ish is praised. I should say ki lefi sichla yehul al adam. But now we understand, that the person with the midas, the ish, how much we praise that person is dependent on lefi sichla. At the end of the day, even you can be a big bal midas. You have a lot of avos, a lot of yira, your inyan is midas, but ultimately, what is the value of your midas according to your seichel? If your head is on straight, then your midas are good. if your head isn't on straight, then you're a big Bal Midas, and they'll be completely messed up. You're gonna have the emotions, love, and you'll love the wrong things, you'll fear the wrong things, you'll worry about the wrong things, you'll desire the wrong things. Leif Yisichle, Yehul Ish, that the person was a Bal Midas, but his praise depends on Sichle. Because based on the amount of wisdom a person has, that determines how much ava the person has, how much chesed that person has. And the same thing is all the other midas of a person. The midas primiyos, the midas chitzonius, all of them are sourced in the chachma, bina, and das, the intellect of the person. And the main thing is hadas. Ikar is hadas shabay, the das in the person. Hanimshach me bechinas hachachma bina. Das derives from chachma and bina. Shabay, which is in the person. Kenira bechush, as we see clearly, ki lefi shinui deis b'di adam is hamazah kachu shinui midiseyan. That the difference between different people in das is what makes them have different midas. And we've spoken about das, I believe, on many different occasions. I think we spoke about it last week also, right? No, we spoke about the neck last week. We spoke about das, right? The das is the idea of connection. Ultimately, your midas depend much more on how much you connect to what you understand than to what you understand, than how much you understand. Yeah.
So how does this connect to Tamim Tiyeh Im Hashem Elokecha? The Shmimus and Chochma V'Da'at, how does it interconnect?
Right. That's an interesting question. And obviously a person has to have both.
It's Pasha from this pasuk.
Right. A person has to have both. There was an Israeli Chaver Knesset, a somewhat famous one, a religious one. Her name was Geula Cohen. Ever heard? What?
She was religious.
Sorry? She was from herself.
Where from?
She was from originally?
She always was from.
Not when she was in the Knesset. She was anti-religious to the nth degree.
No, you're thinking of someone else.
Not
No,
Geula
not
Cohen.
Geula Cohen. Oh, I was thinking about the other lady.
Shalom Saloni?
Shalom Saloni.
No.
Sorry,
No.
I
Geula Cohen was
stand
from.
corrected.
Geula.
Anyways,
I saw.
Yeah.
Mixed up the names.
she passed away a few years ago.
Yeah, Safia Negli, I think is her son.
Maybe, I don't
She
know.
has a son in the Knesset.
Yeah. Named Cohen, last name Cohen. She came to the Rebbe, she was by Farbrengen by the Rebbe, she went to Iggeres by the Rebbe afterwards. And when she was asked about her impressions about the Rebbe, her response was that this is a person who obviously is so brilliant in all areas, in Torah and Lahabtil, also in the secular sciences. And nevertheless, he has emunah like a baba, emunah like a grandmother. Emunah pshuta, in other words, if anyone, the grandmother, the mythical grandmother that barely knows how to read and doesn't, but the emunah so strong, emunah the Eibusher. Now that's the way she described the Rebbe. She says, you think that such an intelligent person, their connection to Hashem is more of a sophisticated one and a complicated one and one crafted with a lot of everything in Torah. There's emunah pshuta. It's not. It could be a contradiction. In other words, sometimes you have a person that their great intelligence doesn't allow them to have that tmimus that you're talking about. But ultimately, the goal, and the Baal Shem Tov, we know that he famously he treasured and he cherished the simple Yidden. And because they had this tamim tia im Hashem Elokecha, he found that in the simple Jews. The simple Jews who came and they davened. I'm actually just on the way here. I'm reading a book. Reading that on the way here. Earlier tonight, I was reading a sefer, and it talked about that there was a certain Rebbe who came to Lubavitch. He was a Chabad Rebbe, but not a Lubavitch Rebbe. And the Rebbe Rashab was the Fidik Rebbe sees him. He's standing in the shul, and he's watching one of the simple Yidden, one of the peasants of the city, in the shul saying Tehillim with a geshmak. And this Rebbe was watching and crying, jealous of the tmimus of the Yid. But does that mean so then we should all be simple? And we shouldn't learn too much and we shouldn't understand too much? But obviously it doesn't mean that. And the Rambam is very clear that we have to learn about Hashem and the greatness of Hashem to reach an Ava. And the question is, can we do that without, not at the expense of that? Can we maintain our Tamim Tiyah, our absolute Emunah, our absolute B'tachon, our absolute trust, and at the same time learning more and more and understanding more and more without touching that Tamim Tiyah? And that's a very, very valid point. So we're talking before that we learn Chassidus, and the more Chassidus we learn, the more that the world becomes Achidush and Hashem becomes Pashat. The more the world becomes, that Hashem becomes more compelling than the world. But I have a little dirty secret to tell you. There are some people who learn Chassidus, and they remain arrogant, self-centered things, and they're still chasing money, and they're still. So what happened to them? Some people learn, and they remain behemoths. So, and what's the missing ingredient over here? The missing ingredient is das. Connection. You never connected. They never really absorbed what they were learning. They never really connected to what they were learning. It was always academic. It was always theoretical. It was always abstract. It was always like a geschmack to figure something out, like a mathematical equation. But just like when you figure out some algebraic equation or formula, you don't connect to it. It doesn't impact your life. What? It's scholastic. A person can chas v'shalom learn Torah in the same way. Can even learn Chassidus in the same way. And that's why das. That's what the Alter Rebbe is saying over here. But Iker hu das. Yes, the midas come from Chachma and Bina, but the Iker, you want to know where the Iker midas come from? You want to really have a Ava for Hashem. It's not enough to learn about Hashem. It's not enough to have the Chachma and the Bina, but it's the connection. Va'adam yoda es chava. Das is the idea of connection. You have to learn something, and most people, something we spoke about many times, most people, they learn something, and then as soon as they understand it, they close the book and they walk away. Oh, I understand it. I figured it out. Which means they're stopping with the Bina. Bina is the processing. When I finish processing the information, then I can move on. I close the book, right? Imagine you're going back to the mathematical formula. As soon as you figure it out, you're not going to sit and think about it for like 15 minutes. What for? It's finished. You finished. I know it. But if you want the das, that you can't close the book after you figure it out, because that's when the real work begins. Once you figure it out, once the Bina ends, is when the real work begins. The work is das. The work is it's connection. And that's why Chassidim, especially in the Chabad tradition, before davening and during davening, they would daven for a long time and they would be misplaining. They would think. What were they thinking about? So for us, some people, it's very hard to imagine. They weren't trying to figure anything out. Usually when we're thinking, we're grappling with something, right? We're trying to make sense out of something. And once we figure it out, we move on. But is it possible that, no, you figured it out, and now you're just thinking about it, absorbing it, connecting to it. To use an example that we've given here before, imagine you go to an art museum, if you appreciate art. I personally don't, but there are people who appreciate art. And imagine if you're an art appreciator, you go, you look at a painting, you look at it for 15 minutes. If you're a real, what are you looking at? Are you trying to figure out the painting? Not trying to figure out. Maybe for the first 2 minutes you're figuring it out, meaning you're, putting it together in your head, and the different colors and the shades and the type of canvas that was used and the style. But then you have it all figured out. Then all you're doing is
enjoying it, basically.
Absorbing it, taking it in. Right?
That's a form of enjoyment.
Yeah, that's that, right? But that's das. Das is connecting. You're connecting to it. You ever been to Niagara Falls, Ruben?
Never was.
You have to go.
Never got around to it.
Okay. Anyways, but if you go to Niagara Falls, you know what I mean? Is you can sit and look at it.
Oh yeah.
What?
I've been to Niagara.
You can look at it and take it in.
Take it.
It's das.
Have an or.
Can you look at Can you learn a Perik in Tanya, a Maimer Chassidus, a piece of Kedushas Levi, Chavis Alavos, whatever it may be, and then look at it. Then look at it. Spend time looking at it. It doesn't have to be you can be looking at it in the words. You can be looking at it in your mind, looking at it, thinking about it, picturing it, taking it in, applying it to yourself. What does it mean to me? And that is what das. And ultimately, at the end of the day, since we're talking about the midas, now the Rebbe says the midas are a result of das. And, the midas are a result of Chabad. And then the Rebbe concludes and says, and especially, the most important key over here is das. In Kabbalah, das is known as the mafteach, the kolil shis, the key that contains the six midas. Das is the key to the midas. And by the way, that's we talk about bar bas mitzvah. And what happens when a child becomes bar mitzvah? They become a bar das. They reach the age of das. Because what the difference in an 11-year-old and a 15-year-old is not necessarily in the level of intelligence. It's not in chachma or bina. And sometimes you can have a Yannick v'chakim, you can have an 11-year-old kid that can eat up a Masechta Gemara in 5 weeks and know it all. That's chachma and that's bina. Das is to connect to something. That when you learn something, you appreciate it. Not only you understand it, you appreciate it. You appreciate its importance. Like you could teach a child, I'll give you an example. Teach a child about money and the value of money. The child will understand. The child doesn't get money. You're not going to give your child money because there's no das. So even though they understand, they have the bina, but there's no das. To a certain extent, we wait even longer, right? There's halacha that until a child is 20, they can't. If they inherit land from a Moirish, they can't sell it because we feel there isn't that das. They don't appreciate the value. They know the value, but they don't appreciate it. Das is not knowing, it's appreciation. Appreciation is connecting. When you connect to something and it becomes real to you. Yes?
I remember my Fabrengens, there was this young kid. He was able to chazer over what the Rebbe said about Fabrengen, but he didn't understand. He would stop and say, what does it mean? When he was
Right.
doing chazar.
So you're talking about something at stage even beforehand. You're talking about a parrot. That's not chacham and bina. That's the certain part of the brain that remembers. Bina means processing and understanding. You're taking it a step.
Understand certain things.
Right. But at the end of the day,
Last part he didn't.
you could have children who are very smart, but even a smart 11-year-old is still a minor. A smart 11-year-old, a genius 11-year-old who does a crime is not going to be prosecuted as an adult. And everyone knows that, understands that, recognizes that. And what do you mean? He doesn't know. He read the book. He read the law book. If you imagine you take an 11-year-old kid who read the law book, can you charge him? No. Why? Because he's 11. And even if he understands and he has the bin on the chachma, he doesn't have the das. He doesn't have the capacity for das. And that's really what bar bas. That's why we become responsible for Torah mitzvahs, and it's the age of ancient at bar bas mitzvah.
You can have an idiot savant that can repeat a lecture and he won't understand anything about it, but he can repeat it.
Right, but it's two different things. At the end of the day, you can have someone who's unintelligent but still has das, and that das kicks in at the age of 13 for a boy and 12 for a girl.
It just kicks in overnight.
As someone who's a parent of children, I can tell you that it's not overnight. But I was really blown away by how at a mamish around that time. It's not something that happens overnight, but in the period of our mitzvah, the months before, the months that after, incredible transition. And my children, boys and girl, you can see that das it really is at that time. A major difference in terms of maturity and taking life seriously and connecting. Not that everything that they learned before, it's not just theoretical and abstract, but a real application of themselves. And okay, I guess I'm biased, and I think my kids are smart. But I guess every parent does. But I think I can have smart kids. They always they always read, they always knew a lot, but they were children. They were children, and what's missing in them was the das. And there was definitely that transition around the time of our bas mitzvah. And as a parent, you really come to respect your children in a different way around that time. You really sense that that maturation process that there is.
The Loshe from the Zohar, Maftech, the Kol Shis,
Yeah.
is only 6, not 7. Malchus is
It's because
Malchus is an act.
the midas are what leads. In other words, the next stage after Chabad is the midas. Once you have midas, automatically you have malchus. Because midas, there's a very small, very little disconnect between it. Especially if you have all 6 midas, including Netzach and Yisod, you already have that. When we talk in general, we talk about the midas, we talk about the 6. We talk about Zah, Zer, Ampin is 6. And the Malchus is the automatic result of that. It's not a Chiddush. The Chiddush is that we have to wake up our midas. Once you have the midas, Ma'aseh B'Poel is not a big deal.
The Malchus Mashpia, that comes from the Midas.
Think about it. If you have a kid, right? What's the big deal? To get them to do something, to excite them about Yiddishkeit. Once they're excited about Yiddishkeit, the Malchus comes. The Malchus is the automatic. Malchus is not anything less longer is the wound, less longer makum. It's a mekabel. In other words, as soon as the flow comes down from all the 9 spheres, Malchus is activated automatically. It's not a separate avodah, so to say.
Malchus is Kabbalah, so.
Malchus is also Kabbalah, so yes. Now, what we're going to find out is that although we finished all the midas, now Chachma through Yisod, but we were now, up until now, we were talking about the midas of the Nefesh Bahamis. But really, we need to discuss the midas of the Nefesh Elokis. Why? Because if we're trying to understand Hashem, which part of us is really the reflection of Hashem? Is our neshama. So we need to talk about the midas of the Nefesh Elokis, and that's what we're going to move into next week. So we're going to find out that really everything we're talking about until now is a mashal, because the midas of the Nefesh Bahamis is a mashal for the midas of the Nefesh Elokis, and the midas of the Nefesh Elokis is a mashal for the spheres above. So we were right now learning a mashal of a mashal, and next week we're going to move on to the actual mashal. And we'll talk a little more next week about the difference between the midas, the essential difference between the midas of the Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Bahamis, and why it was necessary to get a mashal for a mashal. Why couldn't we start with the mashal? We'll talk about that in Mitzvah next week.